Well, hello. My name is John Gamicia, and welcome to taking Class 2s to the next level, like the Stratosphere. I hope you like my title. I try to create something catchy. We go through, we do a lot of stuff together, and you're looking at course material, and you're trying to find the right thing for you. I really hope that this is going to be a lecture that you enjoy and that takes you to the next level as a dentist. Well, let's get started. I have over 250 pictures to show you, and we're going to move really fast, and I hope that you learn a lot, but we might not get into the super nitty-gritty. I'm going to continue to put my email on there. I want you guys to ask me as many questions as you need to. At the end of this, take a picture of my email, and I want you to email me even after the lecture. Okay, so let's get going. First, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize our sponsor, Microbrush and Curare. They have not asked me to do anything specific. I just want you to know these two companies are committed to helping our patients and helping me help my patients, and you help your patients. So I'm sitting at my desk about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I'm seeing a lot of new things coming on magazines and in courses such as implants. Everybody wants to talk about all-on-4s and digital impressions and the CIRAC, of course, and the one appointment crown or onlay. And I keep thinking to myself, what's wrong with the posterior composite? Why do we not see more and more of the posterior composite? And I really think it's just not sexy enough. Maybe it just doesn't sell as much, but I'm here to tell you that it's really sexy to me. And here's the kind of thing that I would see 5 years ago, and Dental Economics puts their financial analysis once a year, and in 2012 they had a fee survey, and if you look real close down in here, they have an amalgam and a denture and a root canal, but one thing they don't have in 2012 is any composite fees. It's kind of a slap in the face to a guy like me that does a lot of composite restorations. And Dr. Christensen, in the back of one of his articles, says that this restoration will be pain-free and should serve the patient well for several years. Now, several years to me is a bit of an insult. Now, I love Dr. Christensen, probably like you, but I would expect most of my restorations to last 10 years, if not 15 to 20 years. And quite frankly, in my practice, if something doesn't last 5 years, no questions asked, I'll replace it for free. So I really do expect, and what you're going to see in this lecture is a lot of big restorations, a lot of pretty restorations lasting for decades. And another kind of funny thing, when I was looking for a website for my illustrious speaking career, maybe not so illustrious, but I started looking for domain names, and I thought, of course, I'm going to start with the most obvious website, and that would be Posterior Composites. And would you know that 5 years ago it was available? So I tell you, that's a slap in the face to a guy like me that no company has actually said, hey, let's get posteriorcomposites.com. So my website is posteriorcomposites.com. All right, let's get right into it. About 6 years after I graduated in 1995 from the University of Florida, I started, maybe getting a reputation of really caring and loving to do posterior composites. So I had a classmate from down south, and he had a patient that went to UCF. Now, this patient was in his practice, but her mother decided to send them to kind of an insurance dentist. Now, not insurance dentists aren't bad, but it just wasn't him. And this dentist, somewhere in the early 2000s, obviously didn't know a lot about doing posterior composites. So I'm going to kind of walk you through restoring this person's mouth again. She walks into my office, and you could see a plethora of problems. Even these two fillings in the back here between 14 and 15, it looks like are actually bonded together. So things are really bad in this case. And in almost every quadrant of the mouth, now these don't look too bad, but these are only 6 months old. I'm going to walk through her mouth and show you kind of how we had to almost redo every single one of them. So here's the first quadrant that I started to replace. I left number 3 because I thought it looked decent, but once I realized that there was decay under every one of these fillings, I went back after all her treatment was done and redid number 3. So how do we find decay? And this red material that you probably already know is I use caries detector in almost every, no, not in almost every tooth that I work on, I use caries detector, every single tooth. And if one thing that's going to happen in under my watch is that I'm going to get all the decay out that I want out. So caries detector is a great way, and if you're not using it, it's super easy. And it's something that has helped me be a better dentist. Sometimes with caries detector, as you get closer and closer to the pulp, you might know that it's not something that's foolproof as you get to the pulp. So you're going to have to make decisions sometimes. It is foolproof. It's telling you where the decay is, but sometimes you might not want to take all that decay out as you get closer and closer to the pulp. And we're going to discuss that a little bit later on in the lecture. So as I walk through this young lady's mouth, I start to take all the decay out. And just like we were saying, as you get closer to the pulp, we're going to talk a little bit about pulp capping later on in the lecture, but we won't talk about it right now. Just know that I put glass ionomer over that, and she has never had a problem since. And this was, geez, I'm telling you, this is 18 years old now. So I cleaned it all up, and in each quadrant, and in this lecture, you're going to kind of see the progression of my style as well. But this is kind of what my teeth look like about 18 years ago. And you can see even back then in technology that's not nearly as good now as with something from, if the old timers are listening, from, I can't think of the company now, is bind time rings and sectional matrices was kind of the start of the kind of class 2 as we know it. Still more repair, great contacts, really good concavities, and I was really pleased, and she was really pleased and had no sensitivity. So you're going to be hearing a lot about the kind of stuff that I do, but I wanted to tell you kind of who I am. And I'm really just a wet finger guy, a 40-hour-a-week dentist in Orlando, Florida, and I just love doing fillings. So I just started taking pictures of them. So you're about to see, I am a C student, so all you C students out there, one day you could be just like me and be given a lecture too. But this is the only picture that I have of me studying and doing studious work, because I have a ton of pictures of me doing a lot of this in dental school. So all you partiers out there, maybe just like me, you are super passionate about dentistry and helping people. So hopefully you'll see that in my lecture. And so you think, okay, here's this guy in Orlando, Florida, maybe in a highbrow practice, and he's able to do kind of a lot of big-time dentistry. Well, I'm not from Orlando. I'm actually from a small town called Apopka, Florida. And, it's a middle-class, hard-working town. So you're going to see things in the lecture that, maybe a tooth probably needs a crown, and they just couldn't afford it. So I just did really big dentistry on them, really big composites. And before I forget, I'm going to try to answer most of the questions at the end of the lecture, simply because I won't have enough time. And, in an hour lecture, I have a lot of material to cover. Here's my practice. This is a standalone building that my father built in 1984. I practiced with my father for 18 years till he retired about 6.5 years ago. So it's just me, and we try our best to keep our practice nice and warm and welcoming. Another thing, a little bit about me, is I've been watching posterior composite CE for a long time, and the guys that I really think are the best at posterior composites. I saw Ray Bertolotti in 1995 at the Orlando airport, and he is the godfather of adhesive dentistry, and really am glad that I met him, because he calls himself the bondodontist, and now I call myself a bondodontist. And this guy, Jason Smithson, and if any of you guys and gals are dental town people, he is a master at his craft. I got to meet, I've met Ray numerous times, but I just happened to sit next to him at the Academy of Biomedic Dentistry in Dallas last year, and he just happened to sit down next to me, and we almost spent the weekend together. It was quite a weekend for me. Here is something that, say, Jason Smithson has done. I tried to find some of his work. And you're going to think, well, why does he have the before picture at the bottom? Well, to be honest with you, this is the after picture. So here's an access filling from a root canal, temporized. And this is the kind of work that Jason Smithson does. And, I would aspire to be that good. You're going to see some good work today. But I kind of feel like I'm a guy that's working in my office every day, and kind of efficiency is important because, I want to be profitable. And something like this, if it takes him, I've seen his lecture one time, maybe an hour and 20 minutes to do this access filling, that's almost too long for me. So I'm very efficient at the work that I do, and I feel like I'm very profitable because I'm efficient as well. But efficiency doesn't necessarily mean fast. It just means I get really good at it. So we're going to talk about the basics, and then we're going to talk about the next level. I'm going to literally blow your mind to some of the things I can do with composite that we can do together. So everyday life here in Apopka, Florida is something like this, where this person walks in, and of course I would agree with you that this person needs a crown, but middle class America sometimes can't afford at 13, or even with a buildup in my office is $1,800 for a crown or an onlay with a buildup. So I got to improvise sometimes and do, something that's maybe doesn't even take me 35 minutes to do, but that is all composite. And something that he came in to restore this one about 10 years later when it broke. This is a guy that I don't see very often, and this was still here 10 years later. And so everything doesn't have to be large, but back in, things that I do every day is just occlusal restorations that look exquisite, if you ask me. And so these are the kind of things with great contacts, good concavities, I do every day, I do efficiently, and don't forget to see this occlusal on tooth number 2 there. Now I'm going to walk you through the steps on how I do it. Again, this person walks in, I say you need an onlay. They say, how much is it to take the tooth out then? And I say, well, let's not get crazy. Let me try to do a filling and try to do a buildup. And I do a buildup, and what happens is after 10 years of saying, well, let me try to do this, and 10 and 15 years of I don't know if this is going to last, and as they come back on recall and I see them over and over and over again, and the restoration that I didn't think was going to last is now 10 and 12 and 15 years old, I start to really believe in the work that I'm doing. So I don't even necessarily say I don't think this is going to last anymore, because quite frankly, I know it does. So here's a nice little DOFL, which is really pretty. This is something that does not take me very long to do. Here's a nice, really pretty occlusal. Things don't have to be too elaborate to be a really pretty filling. This is, to me, is way too much tooth to do an onlay. When I know it's a cusp reduction, I do this filling 100% of the time. I don't even think that this is something that an onlay should be placed on. So I do a restoration like that in about 30 minutes, and everybody is happy, including me. So as I get older in my days, I really start to appreciate art, and I really love Rembrandt stuff. And this is Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son, and there are books written about this piece, this masterpiece, on just the kind of work that he did and the detail. But here is the father, the son, the older brother, and there's been some talk about this being maybe being the mother. But then there's some question and talk about who this is, and some people think that that's Rembrandt himself, putting himself in his masterpieces into the story. And here's the Rembrandt's Descension of the Cross, and a lot going on this one, but there I feel like that might be Rembrandt himself again in this masterpiece. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this, is that we can put our own picture and our own signature in our work every day, and nothing leaves my office without anatomy and without my signature on it. And I want you to kind of take your dentistry maybe to the next level. And this kind of stuff does not take long. And there's a caveat that I've been doing this. I've been graduated 23 years now, and I've been doing this. I mean, this kind of dentistry for 20 years, and it takes a lot of practice, but it does not take me very long to do. So you can see I try to put my little picture. Hope you laughed at that, and on all my masterpieces, and a little DO on tooth number 30. And so there's tooth number A17. You know, why the heck would he do a filling on a wisdom tooth? Well, this tooth was orthodontically moved into the second molar spot, but you almost cannot see this restoration and how big it is, because it's one of my favorites, because I was able to use some really fine diamonds to do the anatomy. So we can't talk about composite without talking about amalgam and kind of how far it's come. So let's take a step back and talk about what was going on in 1995, and that was really the composite had really started to kind of maybe almost being talked about in dental school, but not really being done in dental school. I graduated in 95, and I had to, you know, seek out a visiting professor, because none of the professors in dental school would actually let me do a posterior composite. But the trend from 95 to, say, in the end of this study in 2009 was that composite has really grown in its popularity. And you can see in 1993 that the restorations between the two is only about 400,000 in this study, but in 2008 the restorations were somewhere in the range of 10,000. So that's telling me too that you know, restorations in general are getting more popular, and dentists are becoming much more conservative. And that kind of warms my heart a little bit, because to be quite honest with you, I do not do a lot of crowns in my practice. But composite and amalgam back in the day, in this study in 1997, you know, part of the problem was composite failed, and it failed at a much higher, almost double rate of amalgam. And here's a study in 2002 even that is telling you that, you know, composite had a 16.4 greater risk of failure. That is not good numbers. But so as we know, amalgam back in the day was far superior than composite, and it was idiot proof. You can put it in with saliva, but what you started seeing in 2002 even was, in this study, if the patient stayed with the same dentist, it was 92% success rate and only 60% failure if they changed dentists. So that means, you know, if I watch my own filling, I find that it's successful. If my patient goes to another dentist, he might say that this restoration is failing. So somewhere around that time, we started getting a lot of good results from composite. And here in 2007, in the Socini article, that you're starting to get failure rates that are about the same. And the one on the bottom left here, you know, the composite was failing at actually a better rate. And let's talk about this Optum study on the right here, and that is that in 2007, in a 10-year practice-based study, amalgam and composite was just about the same. And lecturers, I've seen multiple lecturers use this study, that large composites in a low risk group. Now, low risk, that's most of our patients, and that is composite was a superior restoration. Okay, and in 2013, in a study, they were saying that amalgam and composite fail about the same rate. And those are the kind of things that I'm seeing in my practice too. Here's a study, 22-year study in 2011. So we're looking in the mid-90s that this one dentist, they followed all his restorations and found that he was getting failure rates of about 1.5 to 2.2 in composite. But here's the kicker in this study, that 54% of the failures just needed repair. So that is what I do quite a bit. If I see something that I'm not liking, is I'll just trough it and I'll repair it. And so 54% of his failures just needed repairs. So out of 362 restorations in 22 years, only 49 had to be replaced. That's mid-90s dentistry, not even the technology today. So those are the kind of things I see in my practice. I certainly do a lot more than 362 restorations in 22 years. I might do that in a couple months. So, but what the trends are is that amalgams were better than composites. Then you see that they are the same as composites. And actually, with the technology and the research, we're finding that composites are better than amalgams. Let's get back to some restorations. I just wanted to show you the kind of things that I do on a daily basis, and I just want you to kind of get to know the type of dentistry that you can do every day. It's just a two-surface restoration. You're going to see some beveling. Taking pictures of your fillings can sometimes show some things that you would want to change. There's some stain in this tooth, but the restoration really turned out pretty. And that I only, for something like that, if I need 30 minutes, that might be a little bit too long. Here's an MO on tooth number 4. And you see you put a contact ring in, you put a sectional matrix in, a wedge. This is super easy to do. I burnish my band here. Even though it's got decent contact, I still burnish against the adjacent tooth. I love getting contact, so much so that I need hemostats to pull this out. I get such great contact. I love pulling out the hemostats because I can't get the band out. And that's just a restoration, a two-surface restoration that I do all the time. You can see some of my older 15 to 20-year-old restorations still in there looking good. This is kind of a tweener, as you know, like, gosh, this is going to be a big restoration. And it just, I see it every day, and my patients sometimes just can't afford more crowns, and you're saying, well, he already has a crown. Well, that might have been in a time where he could afford it, and as my patient population gets older, sometimes they can't afford it. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And this is so big that I needed a Toffenmeyer restoration. I went ahead and put some Vitrebond or some glass ionomer down on the deep parts where I was concerned, maybe even concerned about the color shining through. Sometimes I'll put glass ionomer down just to kind of block my shade. And I can do a restoration that good with that good of contact with a Toffenmeyer. Whew, talking fast. So I want to just tell you a little bit about products that I use, and I'm gonna diverge and take some tangents here, but you've got to have a good contact ring. And Microbrush has just come out with a new ring that they are really proud of. It's called the Contact Pro ring system. Has very good silicone, really soft silicone. The metal does not get tired, so you don't have to replace the ring ever. And they have some great smart bands, some sectional matrices with Teflon on them at all different sizes, and some without Teflon. I use these almost every day. Oh, here's a sample. Take a picture of this and go ahead and text Microbrush, and they will send you a free contact ring. That's something they wanted me to tell you for this lecture. So go ahead and take a picture of that, and we'll move on. All right, some more products. You've got to have loops. If you are not using loops, you are not seeing everything. And this kind of dentistry demands loops. And so I have multiple pairs of loops because if one goes down, I can't practice. And the next thing to improve your loops is you've got to have a headlamp. And this is a headlamp that, you know, some people are tethered. I've got one, there's a little battery pack. This battery will last me, some batteries will claim to last, you know, a day and then you'll recharge them. This battery lasts me a month. It's a company called Perioptics, and I've had this headlamp. I actually have 2 of these headlamps because I can't work without it. Really small, lightweight. All right, the next product I want to talk to you about is bonding agents. Let's talk a little bit about what we're bonding to before we talk about bonding agents. And I love this picture because there's so much going on in a tooth that we're bonding to with, you know, your enamel lesions and your caries infected and affected dentin, and just kind of the anatomy of a dental tubule. And I don't want to get too far into this, but if you kind of study things like this, like weird guys like myself, a dental tubule is not a cone or a cylinder anymore. It gets much thicker as you move towards the pulp. And what that means is there's more water towards the pulp. So the thicker the tubule, the more water solubility it is. And that's sometimes why we get more sensitivity in deeper fillings. And as you move towards the pulp and you have a wider dental tubules, you actually have less minerals in there. And bonding agents love minerals. So what does this mean? The deeper the prep, the more moist it will be. That's obvious. The deeper the prep, the less minerals. The deeper the prep, the lower the bond strength. So you are not going to get great bond strength deep down into a pulp. And that's why we're going to talk about bevels on our preps, and we're going to talk about really good bond strengths in the enamel and the kind of the higher part of your dentin. Affected dentin. This is the dentin that's really stained. There's maybe sclerotic dentin. So dentin way deep down. We get bond strengths that are almost 50% lower down there. And it's just important to know because on dentistry like I do a lot of deep dentistry. And I'm perfectly happy. My fillings don't come out, and it's because I use a fantastic bonding agent. So let's talk about bonding agents. There are over 90 bonding agents for sale right now. So there's the one thing that they're all trying to do is they're all trying to create a bond that's actually stronger than the shrinkage of the composite. Now think about that a second. All your composite and adhesives are going to shrink. As long as that bond is holding that while it shrinks, you're in pretty good shape. The hybrid layer is the holy grail of what we're trying to do. And I don't have enough time to kind of go over the hybrid layer and all these things, but this is the kind of picture that really jazzes me up. I know it's that geek in me again, but we can talk in a longer lecture about what all this is. But you're going to see a total etch system and a self-etching system. And you have total etch that are 2 and 3 steps and self-etch that are 1 and 2 steps. And we have found that the 2-step system in total etch, the 3-step system, and the self-etching, the 2-step, we find because you're using in the primer, you're using a hydrophilic material, and in your bonding agent, you're using a hydrophobic material, you certainly get superior bond strength. Now, all you geeks out there would know that you're starting to see a lot of one-step systems with really good bond strengths. Now, I'm not going to get into those today. I'm just letting you know that I know that there are superior products out there, but the research says that these two, the total etch 3-step and the self-etch 2-step, are getting really good results. And these are that I've used in my day. And just a real quick side note. Read the instructions. I know it kind of sounds silly, but let's just look at a research article that talked about not reading the instructions. And if you don't rub the primer in, you're going to get, in this particular study, 14 megapixels. If you lightly rub your primer, you're getting 22. If you vigorously rub in a dry, you're getting 37. Think about that. That's 3 times the no rubbing. If you're just letting it sit in there. And in moist, actually, the light rubbing is better than the vigorous. So of course you need to read the instructions, and you will get far superior bond strengths when you do what the manufacturer tells you. Now where were we? Oh, as we were talking about bonding agents. The gold standard for me in self-etching primers is Clear Fill by Curare. This is a product that I have used almost my entire life, and I find if you can't beat something, don't change it. And if it's working for you, don't change it. I tried to change once or twice, and I've always come back to this. I'm going to talk now. What I do with my Clear Fill and with my self-etching primers is I still selectively etch, which means I put a bead of etch on my enamel and then use my self-etching primer. So let's talk a little bit about self-etching primer, the Clear Fill. I read an article about this new thing, and being a guy that's not a real science guy like me, I had to read this article over and over and over again to learn about what it was trying to say. So for you, I'm not going to give you the article. I'm just going to tell you what it says. And I think we all, as bondodontists now, need to know about MMPs. And I'm going to get away from the science in a second, and we're going to go back to hundreds of pictures here in a second. MMPs are something, is a peptide that can destroy your bond, okay? There was a whole page on what MMPs are. They are proteins that degrade the bond, okay? So easy enough, that's bad. So you're going to start hearing about MMPs and degrading of the bond. And what Gordon Christensen says is the bond that we do degrades as soon as people start walking out the door. This part of the article was talking about MMPs are in an inactive state in collagen in the teeth. Okay, so once we prep, the MMPs are inactive. All right, so that's all right. Then the next part of the article talked about when we etch a tooth or when we self-etch a tooth, we remove the crystal that's holding the MMPs and basically release the MMPs to destroy our bond. So MMPs being released by our etching process. We can't get away from the etching process. The next part of the article talks about chlorhexidine. And guys like me were always trying to get better, and the antimicrobial and the MMP inhibitor in chlorhexidine, I used to add this to my technique is that I would self-etch first, then I would put chlorhexidine down to inhibit the MMPs. So you're going to see a lot of words about MMP inhibitors. So chlorhexidine was a good MMP inhibitor and an antimicrobial. Now what they've found is other things can be MMP inhibitors as well. And one of these other things is MDPD. And this is something that Curare can be put into a primer. So instead of chlorhexidine, now Curare has put an MMP inhibitor in the primer. So this is when I started using a product called Clearfill SE Protect. They have an MDPD monomer in its primer. So the antimicrobial and the MMP inhibitors is in the primer. And also in the bond, they put fluoride in it. So this is Clearfill on steroids. This is SE Bond on steroids. I have used Clearfill SE Protect for the last 8 years. And I use it every day on everything. And I don't want to jinx myself, but I almost get zero sensitivity. Zero. And if I do, it's just a little occlusal reduction because I left the filling high or something like that. Almost zero sensitivity. I love this product. And that's where you're going to see research that says it has a great antimicrobial effect. And this is kind of a very wordy research article from CRA, but what they found is, and what you're seeing now is everybody loves Protect because not only does it have bond strength at the beginning, but it keeps that bond strength over years and years and years. The next product that you need to have you need to have a curing light that is very powerful, okay? Let's talk about this. Curing light is so important in the physical properties of the adhesive and of the resin, okay? A landmark study says really feels like 37% of our composite is not adequately cured. So that is a very shocking statement. So what is a standard of light? The minimum standard of your curing light needs to be 1,000 megawatts per centimeter squared. Okay, so how do you know if your light is that strong? Well, you got to get a test meter. So I have multiple meters in my office, and this is the light that I found that has been far superior than anything else I've used, is the Valo or the Valo Grand by Ultradent. It is mega powerful, and this I use the Kerr Demis for almost a decade, and I felt like it was such a superior light until I met the Valo. Here are my light meters, and I'm going to test my light monthly, if not weekly. So if I'm not getting good curing, this is the trifecta or the octahecta. These are the worst things, and this is what can happen to your resins, is the micro leakage, fracture, inflammatory response. That is not something that you want, because that's the sensitivity that you cannot fix. Lower bond strength, wear, secondary decay. It's color instability is when you look at a filling that you did 5 years later and it looks brown. It's because it's not cured. So is your light good enough? Well, they did a survey and they went into a bunch of offices and they found that 46% of lights were in need of repair or replacement. I hope that is not you. Think about this lecture later on and really think about improving your light if your light is not good enough. So, and one other thing as far as curing goes, say you're getting 1200, and this is my Kerr Demi light. What they found in a study is at 45 degrees, you're going to get significantly lower light power on your resin and your adhesive. So if you're not the one putting the light on the tooth and your assistant's kind of lackadaisical about how she puts it on or how he puts it on, you need to be aware that you're not getting good strength if this is not straight up and down. And so here's my Valo light at 2,000. I told you this light is mega powerful, and it has a 3-second cure. So someone who's doing efficient dentistry like I am, a 3-second cure has been wonderful. Okay, and I turn this thing to 45 degrees, maybe just a little bit less, and I get about 1,000. So I'm losing half my power by not having the light perpendicular. I hope that helps. So please be aware of that tomorrow. Isolation, shoot, I am not a rubber dam person, but I use all sorts of isolation techniques, and these dry tips I use every day, and the dry angles I use every day. I use these are cheek protectors that have absorption properties in them that cannot be beat. Okay, I am talking fast. I am on slide 164. You guys are doing great. I hope now we're going to go to the next part, and that is technique and what to do next. So let's talk a little bit about prep design. You know, my preps are super easy. I take the decay out, I round my edges, I bevel my margins. That's all I do. I don't think about anything else about retention, because every filling that I do stays in. So my preps are super small. When I'm talking about preps on adolescents, I think about my kids, and if there's a restoration that needs to be done, I do it as small as possible. So here's a DO, an MO not connected, and then a DO. And this is something that's going to last this patient for a very long time. Great contacts, great contours. And I tell you what, I'm going to give away my secret, and that is I carve all my anatomy with an Explorer. Now I use a little bit different Explorers that are a little bit even tighter than this, and I do it before my composite is cured. So I use my adhesive, my flowable, then my composite, and before I cure, I kind of take away the excess, and I really start doing my anatomy with my Explorer before I cure. And then my finishing, we won't get into finishings or much like that, but I do use a brownie tip. I use a brownie tip and Soflex this. That's it. I don't get crazy with my finishing because I really don't want to take away too much of my anatomy when I finish. So let's do a case together. Here's tooth number 3 where the mesial marginal ridge is broken. And number 2 that needs a replacement of an amalgam. Super easy. This is probably a 30-minute or a 40-minute appointment with me. So you're going to see the contact Pro with the sectional matrix. Sure, I came back and I made this a little bit tighter against the tooth. I made this a little bit tighter against the tooth. Matrix, contact ring, sectional matrix. I used the microbreast wedges. I selective etch. Remember, I put a bevel and then I put etch only on my enamel bevel. SE Protect. I agitate for 20 seconds. I put about at less than a millimeter of flowable in the corners and on the floor of just my box. Then my resin, and usually at about a 2 millimeter increments. If it's 3, I'll probably just fill the whole thing up with 1 increment. I carve my anatomy first, then I cure, then I polish and finish. Something like that. Super easy. You know, I think the only time that I get a little bit disappointed in myself is when I pick the wrong color. But I'm usually around an A2, A3, maybe D2, D3. And on kids, I'll use an A1. All right, so here's a composite that my father did a long time ago, and they just happen to get decay on the mesial of number 30 here. So let's do this together. Ring, sectional matrix. I even left some of the old resin in there, beveled. All the steps again, super easy. Put the wedge, put the band, contact pro, etch for 20 seconds, then rinse. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about moist dentin. How do I get moist dentin? Because I like to keep the dentin moist before I put my primer in. And I never use an air water tip to dry a tooth. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take the vacuum that my assistant has and just have her kind of wave it over my prep just a little bit. I have a pretty strong vacuum, and that just gives me that moist dentin that I really like. So then I put my primer, put my bonding agent, cure, flowable, cure, resin, cure. So this tooth is getting cured plenty, and I'm trying not to heat it up either. So there's some time between each. Then I will do my anatomy before I cure last, then I'll polish, I'll come back and cure again, okay? And that's what this restoration looks like after about 25 to 30 minutes. Really fun to do. That is simple, class 2, beautiful, exquisite restorations that last a very long time. So now we know about adhesives, now we know about fillings. Let's talk about what we can do next. And this is going to be, I'm going to blow your mind here. So I didn't know how to do stainless steel crowns when I got out of dental school, but I knew how to do composite restorations. So on something like this, I knew it needed a pulpotomy, but I didn't know how to do stainless steel crowns. So I did my best to do a composite restoration. So back in the day, I got really good at composite restorations on primary teeth. And I know what you're saying, he's crazy. But I do a little thing in my office that every time I do a filling like this, I tell the kid, when this tooth comes out, I will pay you $10 to bring it into my office. Okay? Now I've had a kid bring in 5 teeth before. He brought in, I owed him $50. I had to write him a check out of the office account. But I get to see these 4 years after I do the restoration, so I can tell myself that it's still working. All right, so let's do a case together. This girl walks in. I have no idea why I didn't do them both together. She is not having any pain, but I know the restoration is too deep, so we end up doing a pulpotomy. Today's day, I'm not going to get into the research with you, but I would not do a pulpotomy now, okay? And we just don't have enough time to talk about why I wouldn't, but I would leave a dentin layer and just do a filling, If there's no symptoms, even in adult teeth, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But in this case, I went ahead and did my Formacretol back in the day. You old timers know what I'm talking about. Then I put some IRM just right over the top and then restored the rest of it. I use a comprimer with some glass ionomer, some fluoride in it, and I just do a restoration just like that. Now, obviously, this kid is really good kid because I was able to do, primary and secondary, anatomy in here. But this is a really good restoration that lasts, and mom is super happy, and they don't have to get a stainless steel crown. All right, so then, just things like this. I do a little DOL on this tooth, and you can't really see it, but there's a DO restoration on this tooth and a really good sealant. So the kind of work that I'm doing on adult teeth, I really like to do it on kids' teeth as well. That's a DO on S and an occlusal on T, and a really nice sealant on 30. Now let's talk a little bit about deep restorations. I do a lot of deep restorations, and in my recall, I get to see what these deep restorations look like and how these pulps are maturing under my restorations. And I'm happy to say that I have a lot of success doing deep restorations. And the research is showing over and over and over again that a direct pulp cap is better than anything else. A one-step direct pulp cap. And if you need me to come back to your town to talk about, do a 6-hour lecture on these kind of things, I will. But here's a kid that walked into my office. He was 22 years old, getting ready to go to medical school, and he had gone to a clinic down the road, and they said he needed, on this tooth right here, he needed a root canal, a post and core, and a crown. To me, that is a filling all day. That is a DO filling with a little glass ionomer on the deep part of the restoration, and this is what this looks like. So not only did he not need $2,600 worth of work, he got about a $310 restoration from me that's very conservative and is going to last a very long time. Well, here's the other side of his mouth. And what did this dental office tell him he needed? That's right, 2 root canal, post and core, and crowns. Sure, this one's a little bit deep. He's not having any symptoms. He's a little cold sensitive. I went ahead and went in there, took all the decay out, put some glass ionomer down, 2 restorations, an MOD and a DO. I had to work a little bit fast because I was taking pictures here. So here's a tooth. Let's ignore this crown that is failing in many different ways, but let's talk about this restoration here. No symptoms, a little cold sensitivity. Doesn't wake him up at night, no spontaneous problems at all. Here's another picture of this. I am going to fill this every day of the week. All right, especially in a young person, but in an old person as well. I do it every day. I did 3 of them today. So this is what a restoration looks like. Sure, I'm asking a lot of this material, but I trust it. I trust it a lot, and I do it every day. So here's some deep restorations. Here's a 5-year post-op on something just sitting right on top of the nerve. Here's a 16-year post-op of a restoration and I watch this every year. And this is you can see the PDL all the way around this distal root. I love doing this stuff because you know what? I almost never have problems. Now I tell them, I use a caveat that, look, this is a deep filling. There is potential for this nerve to die. There's a lot of communication going on between my patient and I. But I say, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to be conservative. If we have to, we'll come back and do a root canal. I probably do 1 root canal a year on those people. And I do a lot of restorations. So I don't know about your town, but again, in my hardworking middle class Apopka here in my town, which I love, this person walks in and I say, well, you need a DO or a DOL on 30, and you need an onlay on, a DOL on 31 and an onlay on 30. And they say, well, how much is that? And I tell them, well, the DO or DOL might be 300, 250 to 300, and the onlay is going to be about 1,300. And they say, well, how much to take them out? And again, this is something that I see all the time. and I'm gonna tell this person, all right, how about we do this? How about I do a couple composite restorations and we'll see how it goes. Well, this is the kind of work that I'm gonna do almost every day. And I believe in it. I know it'll last. And like I told you before, sometimes I don't even offer the onlay, because the next thing that I do is going to be the onlay. So I'm going to tell this person, let's do a couple restorations, and in 15 to 20 years we'll do the onlay. Now, of course, I tell this person they need an onlay. They cannot afford an onlay. So we're just going to improvise, and I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to bevel like crazy to get good bond strength. I'm going to use a Toffemeyer, and I'm going to do a restoration that looks like that. Sure, I went back in and polished that flash off, but this is a restoration that's going to last this person a long time, and it sure beats taking the tooth out because they can't afford an onlay. So I had a pretty good reputation of not doing crowns, and one of my hygienists asked me if I would see one of her, I guess her cleaning lady. It said her dentist told her she needed a crown and she can't afford it. I said, sure, bring her on over. I'll do a composite restoration, no problem. I said, and I looked at it at first and I thought, this is not going to be a problem. We'll take this out. We'll take this out. No problems at all. Well, I took the amalgam out, and what happened to the buccal cusps? They literally, both of them just fell off. So the composite was literally, the amalgam was just holding this restoration, this tooth together. And as soon as I took the amalgam off, everything broke. This is what I had to do. And I knew she couldn't afford an onlay, so I'm stuck. I was stuck with what I had to do. And I put a Toffemeyer. I used this cusp, that mesiolingual cusp period here to hold the Toffemeyer in, and I did the best that I could. I think I did some electrosurge here to expose this part of the tooth, put a Toffemeyer around it, went through all my steps of adhesion, and then layered my composite to build this up. And let me tell you, I just said that, this is my result. Now let's just think about that for a while. Now I want you guys to think about that if you don't have an option when someone can't afford a crown, your patient is in trouble, and you need to give them an option. And I think this is a fantastic option. And let me tell you why. Because I never saw her again, but I did have her phone number. So I texted her one day and I said, how is that restoration doing? This is about 5 years later. And she said, it's so funny that you texted me. The tooth just broke. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're telling me that restoration only lasted 5 years. I said, do me a favor, and I want you to take a picture of the restoration so I can see where it failed. And so she sent me this picture of the restoration. She said, you see how it broke? And what you can see here is my restoration, and the tooth behind it broke. And so here, this restoration is still going strong. 5 cusp composite restoration, 5 and 6 years later, still going strong. I'm pretty happy about that, and I got chills when she sent me that, and I said, hey, that's not the restoration I did. So the research is really starting to back up the kind of work that I've been doing for a long time. And here's a research article from 2014, the difference between the survival rate of direct and indirect restorations were not statistically significant difference. The result that the direct and indirect technique provide comparable results over the long term, okay? So that's fantastic research that is kind of backing up the stuff that I've been doing for a long time. This is last week. Last Monday, I came into the office because someone had broken a tooth. I don't work on Mondays, and I didn't have my camera for some reason, so I took this picture with my phone. And so this is a picture I took with my phone. You know, the funny thing is I did this restoration, I looked it up, I did it 19 years ago. I did an MODL 19 years ago, and she comes in. I might have seen her every 5 years or so. You can see I did a restoration there. Probably this is my restoration from a long time ago. The tooth's in big trouble. Her husband died. She has no money for a composite restoration. I'm sorry, for an onlay. So I do the best I can with a composite restoration. And this is what I did in about 40 minutes. So what can I say? I expect this to last, but I told her that this is more than the material can handle. So if it breaks, we've done the best we can. Pretty incredible. All right, here is the second to last case that I'm going to show you today. This is a wife of a patient that I've had for a long time. They just got married, and she comes in for the first time looking like this. And she says, look, we just paid all sorts of thousands of dollars on our wedding, and I cannot afford to do anything to this tooth. So I say to myself, what are the chances? So it reminded me of a movie that I want to show you. So here's the movie, real quick.
What do you think the chances are of a guy like you and a girl like me ending up together?
Not good.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of 1,000,000.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
So, of course, I said, what are the chances if I just put a composite restoration on top of this thing that it'll last? And I told her, I said, I'm going to put this on here. Let me back up and show you that this is a root. I mean, there's all sorts of wrong things, but this floor is hard as a rock. You've seen these where it's like, I don't know how this tooth is not decayed. It's hard as a rock. The root canal, if you talk to any root canal specialist, they would tell you the root canal that's been exposed for more than 3 days needs to be redone. So I told her all these things. This is not going to last. But I went ahead and did my best. I even put like coloring, I don't know why I did, but I put coloring on top, some opaquer, and just a really pretty restoration in a tooth that had no business having a restoration on it. But, the funny thing is, I get to watch this tooth, and here is a 1-year post-op. And I say to myself, this thing can, and I could have put a post in here. I probably should have put a post in here, but I thought, no way is this tooth going to last, because I figured it was going to break through here, or they were going to have some major, abscesses going on here, so I didn't even waste my time. But guess what? Here's a 2-year post-op. I mean, I don't know how this thing is staying on. And, it's kind of a joke between her and I, because every time she comes in, I expect something to be gone. But here's a 3-year post-op. Obviously, the tooth is in occlusion because now all my stain is gone from the top of the tooth. And she's coming up on her 4-year post-op in November. So this is a 4-year restoration on a tooth that had no business lasting. And I'm pretty proud of that. So I'm just pretty proud of it. And I hope you guys just kind of see. Here's, again, the 3-year. Was the contact great? No. She flosses it all the time. She takes care of this little baby. I mean, even in here, this looks very healthy to me. Almost 4-year post-op. That's pretty awesome. Okay, the coup de grace, the last case that I do. Let me tell you a little bit about this patient. And before I forget, I've just had a great time talking with you guys. Here is a patient. So when she is 55, she has the means, the insurance, her husband is alive. They do a 5-unit bridge. So here is the last 3 units of a 5-unit bridge. And she has decay on the distal end of her bridge. Of course, I tell her, her options are cut the bridge, do an implant, cut the bridge, redo the whole bridge, a 5-unit. I gave her a treatment plan for a 5-unit bridge. I gave her a treatment plan for an implant and a crown. And at this point, she's 75 years old, and she starts to cry. because her husband has passed away. There is no way that she'll be able to get a new bridge. So I said, I'm going to do something absolutely crazy. And I'm going to do something that I kind of think might work, and that is I'm going to cut a box prep inside of the distal part of this bridge. So I'm going to treat it just like a Class 2 restoration. Now, it's a little bit different because you're going to be bonding some to dentin, you're going to be bonding a little bit to metal, you're going to be bonding a little bit to porcelain. Now, I didn't get into all this with you, but Curare makes a wonderful product called Ceramic Primer Plus. And this is what I use on my porcelain and on my metals. And so I just add this to my technique. But basically, I just did a Class 2 restoration on the back end of this bridge. I do, now that I feel like this works, I do this once a month. If it's not a 90-year-old man that needs a new crown, if it's not a bridge that I'm trying to save, I do this all the time. I'm not telling you I'm 100% successful, but I'm pretty successful at it. Here is with Opaquer, with my bond, with my resin. I have got a pretty awesome restoration on the back end of this 5-unit bridge. Wow, I love doing stuff like that. Absolutely love it. All right, in conclusion to our lecture here, we know that composite is a really good restoration. It's a really good material, and with great techniques, it can be fun. This stuff lasts a long time. I can show you picture after picture of 15 and 20, and I mean, really, I've only been practicing for 22 years, and I have 22-year-old restorations I can show you. Very profitable, very efficient. And you got to have the right materials, though. You can't be using, subpar materials. I use great isolation, great bonding agents, great rings, great curing lights, great resins, and I have a great technique, okay? And I do it on primary teeth, I do it on regular teeth, I do it on deep fillings, I do a lot of indirect pulp caps with Vitribond. I do cusp reductions, and I do in crazy stuff like I showed you in the last 5 minutes. Let me tell you this is my name and my cell phone number. Take a picture of this, and that's my email. So if I don't get to your question today, please email me. I'd love to talk to you about it, okay? So let me get to the questions real quick. I just got a couple minutes. The first question is, can I show you that slide again? So here's the Contact Pro ring that I use. Please text them and get a free sample, okay? Direct pulp cap. Okay, so the first question talks about a direct pulp cap. The research states, do your best not to go into the pulp. So I have to say, I almost never go into the pulp. I go into the pulp only by mistake. So if I go, I am going to leave dentin on top of the pulp, even if it is decay, even if it's infected or affected dentin. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to clean the rest of the tooth off, that's a great question. I'm going to leave whatever material is above the pulp, and I use Vitribond by 3M, okay? Next question, I'll do as fast as I can. Do I do one visit crowns? No. The question asked me about glass ionomer. I do not have a triturator in my office. So yes, everything I do is pure composite and mixed glass ionomer that I put on the pulpal and axial walls. I'm sorry if I'm going to miss some questions here because we only have about a minute left. But I'm having trouble scrolling down. Okay. Okay, so the question asked me, do I agree that my filling is staying put because it's locked in an undercut? I don't believe so, because there's no way you can get a matrix in there if it's undercut. And I have tried like crazy to put a matrix in the undercut, and I end up cussing for about 15 minutes, and then not doing it. So I don't believe I'm putting any undercuts. The composite I use is Majesty ES by Curare. I love the material. I think it's awesome. It's easy to use. That's Majesty by Curare. Okay, so this question asks about my sectional matrix or a Toffenmeyer. I'm going to go to my sectional matrix, every single time if I can. If I can't, I'll use a Toffenmeyer. Sometimes you can use a Toffenmeyer with a different kind of band called a water pick, and it has contours on the Toffenmeyer. So look into that and email me if you have any questions. Listen, I am out of time. I so appreciate you guys being here. I love talking to you. I am so passionate about this, and I hope that I have made you more passionate about it. And I think doing this would be just an absolute great thing for both of our patients. Thanks for everything. I'm honored.